Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Economic Forum. My name is Tawanda Goodlanga. We are back again with the subject of public policy, as of course a lot has been happening in the first quarter of the year, and what has taken center stage is COVID-19 pandemic, which really has changed the way of doing policy in Zimbabwe and the globe. And my guest this week is Mr. Machisa from the Institute of Public Policy. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Tawanda, and thank you, Zimbabwe.
The last time you were here, the issue of lockdown, or the talk of lockdown, was still speculative, and then the lockdown then came. Let's talk about the lockdown as a policy and the subsequent extension of that particular lockdown.
Indeed, I think it came at the right time. Some of us participated in writing small, short articles that were looking into the negativities and positivities of extending the lockdown. And I'm happy that the president took the right path of extending the lockdown. Also important to undertake here, Tawanda, is that Zimbabwe is not in isolation. It is within the global realm of the world. And therefore, the standards of health service delivery to the people should equate other countries. So the president saw it fit to actually pick some of the standards that are prescribed by World Health Organization. But most importantly is that Zimbabwe was going through different phases, and you discover that the decentralization which with the Ministry of Health had started had not actually gone to quite a number of districts and provinces. So it was going to be a little bit restrictive for them to see the actual trend of COVID-19 if the lockdown was not extended. So I really think it was very key for the president to extend the lockdown by at least 14 days that he pronounced.
The president himself admitted that it was indeed a tough decision to make, given also the scope and nature of Zimbabwe's economic terrain. And there have been mixed reactions to the extension of the lockdown. But in your view, when we talk about formulation of policies and implementation thereof, and benchmarking, as you say, that Zimbabwe does not live in isolation, was it really the best way for Zimbabwe, or there were some anticipation that Zimbabwe, because of its unique scenario, had to sort of lift off the lockdown and then probably enforce another lockdown to give time for people to, if I may use the term, forage and then hibernate again in lockdown?
I think the cabinet had a tall order to come up with that decision, because Zimbabwe is almost like an informal economy country where quite a number of people, more than 70–80%, are living from hand to mouth. And therefore, for the citizens to just wake up with their businesses being shut or not operating, it becomes very difficult. But we need to be visionary. We might say we have locked down today, but what about the next week? What about the next month? What about the next quarter? So it's important for us to guard against what could erupt as a national crisis. So I think it was a gap to ensure that we have arrested what we think could explode as a national disaster. So it's very important also to note that when the president was actually giving his speech, he accepted that it was a very difficult decision, because there were quite a number of considerations that were put. I will tell you for a fact that I was expecting the president probably to announce that probably 5 days before, so that probably you equip your citizens probably with some planning, those who would want to rush and get some medication, those who want to restock their food, that kind of a thing. But look, it happened. He announced. I'm saying, yes, okay, Machisa, I was expecting probably the president to have announced that before.
Now let's talk about other issues that may arise out of these policy pronouncements that are made by the highest office and their impact to the ordinary citizens. Because the key word there is visionary. You have a leadership that should be visionary, that sees beyond the ordinary. But at that particular time, not everyone sees that sort of vision. What sort of other complaints would come out of these policy pronouncements?
A number of complaints started to come out when the first lockdown was pronounced by the president. So you would find that the enforcement of the law then had to touch on the security service providers, where some of the citizens were complaining that they were being beaten by the police, they were being beaten by the soldiers, that kind of a thing. It's a standard that we think we don't want our country to be associated with. Wherever our security services are being provided to the citizens of Zimbabwe, we should not have complaint by citizens where they say we have been abused. But it is also important to balance the way that our security services provide protection to the people and the way that we citizens behave. So when we are told to behave in a certain manner, I think I would like to encourage the citizens of Zimbabwe to try and move towards that trend without attracting any other force to help you to stay in your house. But it's very unfortunate for us to get records that there are citizens that are complaining that they've been beaten by the police or they've been beaten by the soldiers. It's not a norm or a tradition which is normally associated with a democratic country like Zimbabwe.
But one of the issues that have been raised is the lack of appreciation for certain policies. Lockdown as a policy itself, where citizens have been wantonly disregarding these policies.
We have certain behaviors within our citizenry that is not really good, very negative at times, where you think you want to correct something there and there, some other individuals see it as a different path. But every time when you have a regulatory framework coming in or a law coming in, it is coming to affect those people that will end up being arrested. So we are getting to about 10,000 people that have been arrested simply because they are not abiding by the framework that have been put there by the government. But look, I just want to encourage the citizens of Zimbabwe that laws, orders, regulations, bylaws, these are put in order for us to have a developed country. Imagine if we wake up without this regulatory framework which the government have put in, we will end up with everybody dead, because they have not regularized how people are going to move, how are you going to get your food, how are you going to stop spreading COVID-19 or the coronavirus to the next person.
Join us in the second segment where we focus on the ultimate public policy, which is the Constitution. Join us then. Welcome back. We are focusing on public policy in this COVID-19 era, and we have Mr. Machisa from the Institute of Public Policy. Now, you've been quoting the Constitution of Zimbabwe, which is the supreme law of the land. But let us focus on its contents and the pandemic that we are facing of COVID-19. How relevant is it, or we need to come up with other regulatory framework which might not really be aligned to the Constitution?
The government has come up with quite a number of statutory instruments. These are very administrative laws that are supposed to regulate or to make sure that administration of certain ministries are done in a certain way. So like the Ministry of Health and Child Care has come up with quite a number of regulatory frameworks that are put into a statutory instrument. So these are supposed to be augmenting what is prescribed by the Constitution itself. I'll give you an example now. Tawanda. We have a lot of donations that are coming into Zimbabwe. All right? So these donations are not going to the Ministry of Healthcare alone. There is Ministry of Public Service, Labour and Social Welfare, which is also part and parcel of this. The game is that there is this interministerial task force that the president actually came up with. So this is to allow these donations to come in. But if you go now to the law that you're talking about, the Constitution, chapter 13 provides for the existence of the Anti-Corruption Commission. So everybody in Zimbabwe is looking at the donations that are coming on a daily basis. And therefore, everybody becomes a police person. Everybody wants to see, is there no repetition of something that we read about from Cyclone Idai donations? Are these donations going to be channeled to the people? Or some people are going to take an advantage of these donations? That's number one. Number two, there is also a possibility for politicians to abuse their political careers. There are certain people that are now trying to take an advantage of these donations and to try to politicize the whole game. And let me emphasize and request our politicians to look at the plight of Zimbabwe, not at the plight of their constituencies, not at the plight of their own selfish thinking. It is the time for us to fight coronavirus together without politicizing these things. So exactly like what I'm saying, it is very important to realize that the Anti-Corruption Commission is there. And I think they have got channels, they have got departments that have started to look at this without anybody saying, you know, Anti-Corruption Commission, look, Masagatu, HBAGAS or MISA and that kind of a thing.
But are citizens empowered to question what happens to donations as they come in?
Yes, they are. These are public donations that are coming in. The reason why you see the government is actually displaying this and putting this to everybody is that for Tawanda and OK to be able to trace, are these donations going to the rightful persons and are they being used in the right channel that they are supposed to be used? So indeed, citizens that are there, in Zimbabweans, we have got the right to check whether these donations have been used properly.
And do they have recourse? Do you have policies that then protect the citizens in the event that they are actually going to raise complaints and seek recourse?
Anti-Corruption Commission has got all the mandate to exercise protection of these resources that are coming to the Zimbabweans. And don't forget that it is an organization that represents the citizens. So citizens have got good access to the Anti-Corruption Commission. They've got also good access to other independent commissions that are provided for by the Constitution in Chapter 12.
But how do we then, separate the politics of the day? Like you are saying that there may be some politicians who may decide to ride on the pandemic wave and also make a name out of political mileage, gain political mileage out of this. How do you really separate the two?
It's all to do with constitutionalism and the rule of law. If you become a politician who lives outside the auspices or the borders of constitutionalism and rule of law, you will always find yourself operating negatively. So like what we are saying, it is important for any politician to know that when I am subtracting this donation and trying to do it clandestinely, you are not respecting your constitution. You are not respecting the rule of law. You are outside. So you are a bad apple. You are not supposed to be a politician. Neither are you supposed to be a leader at all. A leader is always there to serve the people, not to steal from the people.
But let's talk about moral suasion. Does it work? You are talking about just that, the conviction that what I am doing is representing the people of Zimbabwe. But the big question is, shouldn't we just have policies that then just deal with the wrong politicians or anyone for that matter that then meddles with public goods, because donations become public goods after all?
There are laws, there are rules, there are commissions that have been put to regulate people's behavior. But when we talk about politicians, there is a word which is called impunity. Some want to, they run away from bad things that they have done and they are let go because they are big fish. But this is not for us. This is not the time for us to look at the big fish. The Anti-Corruption Commission is there not to spare anyone. Anybody who has been found on the other side of the law, they have to face the wrath of the law.
Let's also talk about non-governmental organizations, okay, because whilst the government is naturally under public scrutiny and loopholes and its faults are quickly identified, but we've also seen a fair share of shady dealings that are actually happening within the NGO sector. Are there policies that also safeguard the citizens from such shenanigans?
Exactly. Zimbabwe has got a constitution that is very clear. It has got laws that are very clear. They don't leave any organization or any individual because they belong to an NGO. If an NGO has done something that is wrong, they have to face the wrath of the law.
Join us in the third and final segment as we interrogate the impact of COVID-19 to the policy framework. Join us then. Welcome back. This is the third and final segment of our Economic Forum, where we are focusing on public policy and the COVID-19 era. Now, before we went to the break, you touched on the role of the constitutionalism, the laws of the land. But these are interesting times. I think even for the academic field, these are interesting times. And for policy experts such as yourself, it would be interesting to sort of pick your brain with regards public policy pre-COVID-19, during COVID-19, and post-COVID-19.
Let me center my submissions here on policies that we are realizing as we are in the middle of COVID-19. So the government has looked into some subsidies in terms of upkeep, food. So we've heard that they've identified vulnerable families that are supposed to be getting some subsidies or some money from the government. That policy is very important. But let's look at, is 1 million the right figure? Or we need to increase it, looking at the informal sector that we have in our country. The informal economy that we have in our country has left almost everybody needing assistance from the government. So it will be very important for the government to try and review and look at, is 1 million okay? Or I would recommend that the figure has to actually be reviewed up. And this is going to happen to assist quite a number of people in the urban areas, but also most importantly in the rural areas. The other thing that we need also to understand is that as we are within COVID-19, what are the policies that infringe on the citizens' rights? I don't want to touch on quite a number of things that have already started to happen. Like if you look into Harare, there are quite a number of demolitions that have taken place at people who are running their own small businesses. What that has happened, I don't want to zero in on that, but those are certain things that are very touchy when it comes to the livelihood of the people of Zimbabwe. Of course, we are trying to manage coronavirus and how it is going to have an impact on the people.
But is that not righting the wrongs that have always perpetually existed? For example, I'm sorry, I will have to put you back on the spot with regards to the demolitions, where we did find informal settings sprouting in Harare and other urban areas, and there's been a perennial call for righting those wrongs. Is this actually not the way forward to actually come up with policies that now right some of these wrongs that were let to fly by pre-COVID-19?
It's probably mainly to do with the timing. So people are betting, you get what I'm trying to say? Kuti COVID yoya yochorowa kumsana, topwanyirwa sooner. I think it's all about time. Probably those who are administrating the city realize that probably this is the right time for them to try and correct certain measures. But look, it's important to look at the effects of these things, these policies that we do to the citizens. We are all here saying, probably we have got something to eat, we have something to put on, we've got shelter here. There are certain people that do not have food at hand, as I'm talking about, whose properties have been destroyed. There are so many political inclinations around all this. So you look at who responded to these events that took place in Harare and other cities. Quite a number of people responded, but look, what are they saying? Kunakurirana nyoka menyu maruta izvandina kuti ndiite izvandina kuti ndezvaningi, you know, that kind of a thing. So is it really helping? Who is going to be responsible for this? COVID is going to leave us dented as a country. Let me look at how to address some of these policies, how to put some policies that can deal with stigma itself. Iwewe warwara tawanda ne-COVID, hauzonzi here nevamwe kunze uko, tawanda munhu we-COVID, stigma yadouya. How are our people going to survive post COVID without being stigmatized? How are we going to survive? Tomboti imba yose yawaipiwa ne-corona vaenda, and my breadwinners aenda. How are these people going to survive? We need to put my policies and to safeguard these people.
Talking about the future as well, let's look at governance. What are some of the key stepping stones that probably the executive needs to start looking beyond? You've spoken about social protection, protection of the vulnerable, coming up with some sort of social cover as well to deal with stigmatization. But from an economic perspective, what are some of the key stepping stones that need to be understood moving forward?
The first thing that probably I would suggest as Machisa is to look at the survival means of the citizens of Zimbabwe in the event that we have faced the worst. So probably you compartmentalize green, yellow, amber, red. In the event that we have got this green, these are the policies, like probably Zimbabwe has been spared, and we are not going to see a lot of fatalities. What are those things that can make Zimbabwe tick in terms of our industry, in terms of our agriculture, in terms of our informal sector, which has really been hit hard? You will see quite a number of people being really affected, like the cross-border people. They are going to be affected big time, because I don't see, in my view, I don't see borders really opening that much for the next 1 year or 2 years. These are the people that probably might need to have policies that can define their path in terms of their survival. Then probably you go to amber, probably we have seen quite a number of fatalities. What are we going to be doing with those families that have been affected? Is it going to be a usual way of looking kuti ndoda iyazibonela kuna tichangoti wakafirwa ndo wakafirwa? So what is the government going to do in the event that we've got quite a number of fatalities? But if we go to the red, which is worse, where probably a lot of people have really died, it has to, we actually need to look at, this is not the work for the executive only or the parliament. This is a collective strategy which the government has to look at, the international community, the churches, the NGOs, everybody has to look at it. And this has to start now. The planning has to start now so that we can arrest any challenge that can emanate in front.
Mr. OK Machisa, thank you so much for finding time to come to the studio and, of course, unpacking public policy framework.
Thank you.
Our guest was Mr. OK Machisa from the Institute of Public Policy, as we were focusing on public policy in the COVID-19 era. It has been a pleasure taking care of you here on Economic Forums. Until we meet again next time, it is a pleasant viewing.